Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Welcome, one and all, to Cineversary, a podcast that celebrates a milestone anniversary of a masterful work of cinema. Every month, we extend happy birthday wishes to a different film currently observing a joyous jubilee. That's anything from a 20th all the way up to a 100th anniversary. This, as ever, is your devoted host, Eric Martin, creator of the Cineverse blog and moderator of the weekly Cineverse film discussion group. And hey, if you just stumbled on our show, come on in, there's plenty of room. Returning listeners, yeah, we appreciate you too. 100 years ago, Charles Chaplin was the world's most famous person, one of the richest and most popular entertainers on the planet, and a major entrepreneur who was reinventing film comedy. In 1919, he co-founded United Artists, a groundbreaking move that gave him full creative and financial control over all his films. 2 years later, he made his first feature-length comedy, The Kid, and earned worldwide acclaim. But it was his efforts in the mid-1920s that solidified his status as a master filmmaker with an uncompromising vision, an artist who was willing to pour virtually unlimited resources into an epic production. That production was The Gold Rush, originally released on June 26, 1925, which proved to be one of the biggest theatrical moneymakers of the decade and one of the most influential funny films ever made. In this installment of Cineversary, I'll go prospecting for comedic gold by revisiting this picture in its centennial year, and I'll be joined on this expedition by Jeffrey Vance, a film historian, film archivist, and author of the book Chaplin, Genius of the Cinema. Together, we'll mine the priceless merits of the Little Tramp's hilarious and impressive adventure, examining how it has stood the test of time, what makes the laughs evergreen, and how scores of imitators have been inspired by this masterwork. Prior to my long-form discussion with Jeffrey, let's say we set the proper mood by providing some context and backstory on this month's Spotlight film. Released in 1925, The Gold Rush is a silent-era comedic masterpiece crafted entirely by Charlie Chaplin, who not only wrote, directed, and produced the film, but also starred in it as his iconic character, the Little Tramp. He was joined by actors Georgia Hale, Max Swain, Tom Murray, Henry Bergman, and Malcolm Waite. Chaplin found his muse in the stark realities of history, the ambitious struggle of those who joined the Klondike Gold Rush, as well as the haunting desperation of the Donner Party. The Donner Party, by the way, was a group of American pioneers who set out for California in a wagon train back in 1846. The party became trapped by heavy snowfall in the Sierra Nevada mountains during the winter of 1846 to 1847. Facing extreme starvation and harsh conditions, some members of the Donner Party resorted to cannibalism to survive. Of the 87 people in that party, only 48 made it to California alive. Their story remains one of the most tragic and well-known tales of westward expansion in U.S. history. Fascinated by the razor-thin line between tragedy and comedy, Chaplin infused this bleak inspiration into a humorous but poignant tale of hardship and survival. The result was a story about a hopeful drifter seeking fortune in the frozen north, battling hunger, cold, isolation, and the occasional grizzly bear. Some of the film's most memorable scenes include Chaplin preparing and eating his boot like a gourmet meal, and a delusional friend imagining him as a giant chicken. Although the early parts of the movie were shot in the snow-covered Sierra Nevada near Truckee, California, where Chaplin orchestrated an epic recreation of the Chilkoot Pass climb using 600 extras, most of the movie was filmed on constructed sets at Chaplin's Hollywood studio. Only the film's opening sequence remained from the on-location shoot. Originally cast opposite Chaplin was Lita Gray, whom he married in 1924. However, she was replaced by Georgia Hale due to her pregnancy. Gray still appears briefly in the film as an extra. According to Hale, who spoke in the documentary Unknown Chaplin, the filming coincided with the deterioration of Chaplin's marriage, which added emotional layers to their on-screen interactions, particularly the final kiss in the original cut of The Gold Rush. Upon its debut, The Gold Rush earned rave reviews and quickly became a box office sensation. It remains one of the top 5 highest-grossing silent films ever, pulling in over $4 million by 1926, equivalent to nearly $59 million today. In 1942, Chaplin revisited The Gold Rush, trimming and re-editing it, adding his own narration and composing an original musical score. Chaplin made a few changes to the storyline as well, such as removing the kiss at the end and cutting a subplot involving romantic deception. The original 1925 version, meanwhile, entered the public domain in the United States in 1953 due to a lapse in copyright renewal. The Gold Rush has earned enduring critical acclaim across decades and continents. In 1999, The Village Voice placed it at number 49 in its top 250 best films of the century list, based on a survey of film critics. Entertainment Weekly ranked it even higher, naming it the 15th greatest film of all time. Meanwhile, the French magazine Cahiers du Cinéma included it at number 97 in its 2008 list of the 100 greatest films ever made. In the 2012 director's poll by Sight and Sound, the film placed at number 91. Its legacy continued into 2015, when the BBC ranked it as the 17th greatest American film, drawing from the opinions of critics worldwide. 2 years later, in 2017, another BBC poll, this time focused on comedy, ranked The Gold Rush 25th among the greatest comedies ever made, based on input from 253 critics across 52 countries. The Gold Rush also ranks number 58 on the American Film Institute's 100 Years, 100 Movies 10th anniversary list, released in 2007. This actually marks an improvement from its original 1998 AFI ranking of number 74. Head over to Rotten Tomatoes and you'll see that The Gold Rush earns a perfect 100% fresh rating, as well as an 8.6 out of 10 critical score, versus a 93% popcorn meter rating among fans. Alright, of course, this initially was released as a silent movie, so there's no original theatrical trailer I can share with you folks, but there was a British reissue trailer for the 1942 recut that we can feast our ears on, so let's give it a go.
Here is Chaplin as you love him, in The Gold Rush. The great Chaplin in an uproarious, heart-warming picture, enriched by his words and music. Entertaining us with one of his inimitable performances. Here he is, one of the world's greatest laughter makers. Charlie Chaplin in The Gold Rush.
Feel that rocking? It's the stomach.
Just look at this little man with the genius to entertain everyone at any age.
If you'll only be cool, be calm, said Big Jim. We have nothing to worry about.
Charlie Chaplin in the world's greatest laughing picture, The Gold Rush.
As is true of every Cineversary discussion I have with my guests, yep, the following conversation, it's going to be spoiler-tastic, and that means key plot points are going to be revealed. So if you've never screened The Gold Rush before, why don't you make up for lost time, mark off that old checklist, and come back to us at this point in the show. Let's give a warm welcome now to Jeffrey Vance, a film historian, film archivist, author of the book Chaplin, Genius of the Cinema, and he's even the provider of the audio commentary found on the Criterion Collection edition of The Gold Rush. Now, we last heard from Jeffrey 4 years ago, it was, when we celebrated the 90th anniversary of Chaplin's City Lights, and we are so thrilled that he's agreed to return to our show. So, Jeffrey, thanks for coming back this anniversary.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, perfect guest for this month and this anniversary celebration. So let's get right into it, sir. When and where did a younger Jeffrey Vance first watch Chaplin's The Gold Rush? If you recall, maybe the circumstances, maybe the age you might have been, also your initial reaction.
I saw The Gold Rush for the first time at Kent State University. This was shortly after Chaplin died on Christmas Day, 1977. I was 7 years old.
Wow.
The Gold Rush was 52 years old. And I thought The Gold Rush was brilliant, funnier and more memorable than the new movies I was seeing. I was just in awe of The Gold Rush, and I'm still in awe of it. And I've seen the film well over 100 times, all over California, New York City, Boston, Chicago, London, as a silent film with orchestra, as Chaplin's 1942 reissue version with his narration, as film and digital presentations, at home, on television. I examined Chaplin's earliest film holdings on a rewind bench outside of London. Basically, what I'm saying is I've seen this film in every possible way.
Every iteration you can imagine,
Over
right?
a great many years, over a great many places.
Yeah.
And I even knew a couple people that worked with Chaplin on The Gold Rush.
Amazing.
It's his masterpiece, one of the most important and enduring films ever made. My opinions have changed on other Chaplin films, but with this film, it hasn't changed. I've always loved it.
Well, thanks for sharing those recollections, Jeffrey. You know, for my part, I first discovered this film about 20 years ago, and yeah, I fell in love with it instantly, I got to tell you. But it was actually my first major introduction to a Chaplin feature film, and among his masterpieces, I regard it as his most bold, his most elaborate and impressive, although not necessarily his funniest, which for me remains Modern Times, although City Lights persists as his crowning achievement in my book. The Gold Rush is chock full of probably the most memorable Chaplin gags, set pieces, and jokes of any of his pictures. The Dance of the Rolls scene alone may be enough to hoist this picture to masterwork status, but The Gold Rush also contains the fantastic Teetering Cabin escape episode, the unforgettable Thanksgiving dinner shoe feast, the inventive Charlie as a Giant Chicken scene, the dance with the tethered dog, and so many other showstopper sequences. So where does The Gold Rush rank for you among Chaplin's filmography, and why?
The Gold Rush ranks at the top.
So it's your favorite Chaplin film of all?
I would say with City Lights. However, in terms of writing and directing, I believe The Gold Rush must be considered Chaplin's supreme achievement. It's his best character-driven narrative, and it contains his finest comedy set pieces, namely the boiling and eating of the boot, the dance of the rolls, the teetering cabin.
Yes.
So for sheer comic invention, The Gold Rush can't be beat.
Wow. Yeah, I can't argue with that.
I mean, I love City Lights.
Right.
That feels like a more of a movie to me. People that don't even like silent comedies will watch City Lights, and it's got other things that maybe The Gold Rush doesn't, but in terms of writing and directing, in terms of sheer comedy invention, I think The Gold Rush must rank at the top.
Well, now, The Gold Rush actually exists in two editions, right? The 1925 original and a 1942 reissue that Chaplin provided voiceover narration for and edited a bit. So what are some of the, briefly here, what are some of the differences between these two versions, and which one do you personally prefer?
The silent version is an epic, a great comedy epic. And it's longer, and it has in the titles. It's a mute thing. The 1942 recut edit is more of a storybook fable. He shortened it, reduced it, composed a beautiful score for it, and added his own narration.
There's no intertitles that remain in the 42 version.
Yeah, it was made for a new audience, and it was very successful. It was nominated for 2 Academy Awards. But when we're talking about masterpieces, I think we must talk of the silent version. The 1942 version has a lot of detractors. I think because mainly they don't understand what Chaplin's intentions were. And most people just have a knee-jerk reaction to anything that's been cut. But one aspect of the film, the 1942 version, that people just do not understand is that Chaplin's narration was greatly influenced by Robert W. Service, known as the Bard of the Yukon, and his book, The Songs of the Sourdough. And this is lost on people today that just think Chaplin's narration is just over the top, but it's perfectly in keeping with the type of film he was making.
Okay.
And then the way he actually originally presented it in 1925, there was Sid Grauman had a prologue of just all that Robert W. Service material. But people like the silent version, and that's fine. You have a choice.
And how about you between the two?
Just depends on my mood. If I'm watching it on television, I think I prefer the 1942 version. If I want to see it in the cinema with an audience, if I want to show convert someone to Chaplin, I think I would pick the 1925 cut.
Okay, fair enough.
But I've seen them play beautifully, both versions. I mean, I used to take the 1942 cut to USC and play it in that big Norris cinema with 300 undergraduates, and it would go over like gangbusters.
Oh, I'll bet.
So both versions work, despite what people will say. But I understand why people prefer the 1925 version. I refuse to denigrate the 1942 cut. It's just a different film.
Absolutely. How and why, Jeffrey, has The Gold Rush stood the test of time? It's 100 years now. So why does it still matter, and what makes it a great watch? Why is it worthy of celebration a centennial later?
Wow. Well, it certainly has stood the test of time, hasn't it? The industry trade paper Variety maintained that The Gold Rush was the 5th most profitable film of the entire silent film era. That's a mass audience. And it was also critically well regarded at the time. So it was successful and connected with both the public and critics all over the world. It's done very well in various reissues. We just mentioned the 1942 version. It continues to sell well on home video and on various platforms. So you can't say that about too many films that are 100 years old.
Right.
One need look at those greatest film lists. The most important early one was the Sight and Sound list from 1952, where they polled various critics, and The Gold Rush and City Lights made their top 10.
Wow.
And, The Gold Rush is on the American Film Institute top 100 list. I think any serious and thoughtful list of great films will include The Gold Rush. It's a masterpiece.
Yeah, so let's get into why and how it's a masterpiece. To me, I mean, it's a shining example of Chaplin's cinematic savvy, right? Every element from its episodic narrative and I'd say, the emotional undercurrent to the meticulous visual design, the remarkable set pieces you mentioned, everything's handled with remarkable finesse for such a big epic scope production. And to me, the attention to period detail is also astonishing. If you learn more about it, I'm sure you're the expert, you're the archivist and the historian, you know all about this. You've written extensively about Chaplin, but the extent to which he really tries to be authentic to the period in the look, the attire, the expeditions of that period based on antique photographs. Chaplin and his team amazingly recreate this historical period and wintry environment on, well, they retreat back to Hollywood, so it's, I guess, warm Hollywood lots and sound stages. So just the ability to recreate heavy snow at that time in 1925 is impressive enough. And you ponder, too, that, I'm reading here the production spans, 17 months, hundreds of actors and extras, even the early shots of the men going up the Chilkoot Pass. I guess those are, just vagrants and wayward kind of extras that they gathered. So talk about authenticity, like desperate men, actually signed on as extras here. So it makes sense that Chaplin wanted this to be the movie he should most be remembered for, right?
Well, he said that at the time in the press book. This is the picture I want to be remembered by.
Mm-hmm.
That he made that statement at the time, and I'm sure he meant it. But people have grasped onto that in various years, thinking that, that he felt that this was his favorite film, or this is the picture I want to be remembered by. That certainly wasn't true after 1925. So when people keep latching on to something that was, used as a publicity gimmick, not the case. He preferred City Lights. That was his favorite film. If you asked him and pushed him, I'm sure he would have said The Gold Rush was one of his top 3 favorites. He did at the time want to make this the greatest comedy ever. And he was certainly ambitious. He certainly tried to film The Gold Rush on location. He went up to Truckee in Northern California, but he took too long. And he needed and wanted the controlled conditions of his own studio. So he finished the film back in Hollywood, and he was very successful in melding the location footage from what he was able to achieve in the studio. He had a brilliant cinematographer in Raleigh Tothrow with all those stop motion animation for the little figure hanging out of the cabin I mean, just brilliant work.
Sure.
The camera work, for dissolving from Chaplin, the little fellow into the chicken costume. Brilliant work.
Absolutely, yes.
It,
Yes.
it holds up well. Even in 1942, the trade papers were remarking that Raleigh Tothero's work was really quite first class. I mean, even the industry was quite impressed 20 years later, looking back at the silent film when everyone was wanting to denigrate silent films by the 40s. It's just is a very impressive piece of work. And you mentioned episodic. Yes, it is episodic. But what I think characterizes the Gold Rush is above the others is the fact that those episodes in this character-driven narrative push everything forward.
No, it's true.
You can't always say that about some of the set pieces in City Lights or Modern Times. In the Gold Rush, all those wonderful episodes move this character-driven narrative forward, and I love it.
Yeah, I don't think it's a negative. Often
Oh,
it's connoted as, yeah, they're just kind of stringing it together, right?
well,
Episodes strung together, and they don't really fit necessarily cohesively as a narrative. But here you're right; it progresses the story.
yes, I mean, like the whistle routine
Mm-hmm.
in City Lights makes me uneasy because it doesn't push the narrative forward.
Mm-hmm.
The Gold Rush, all the wonderful bits push everything forward towards the rightful conclusion for this epic.
Right.
It's his best work for that reason.
But even after a century, I think, in my opinion, the Gold Rush remains highly entertaining, deeply resonant in its themes, in its poignancy. And its success, of course, lies to me in its ability to evoke laughter and deep feelings together through physical comedy and pantomime rather than spoken dialogue. I think the narrative remains completely accessible even without understanding a single word. That goes without saying here, especially in a really well done, well crafted silent movie. It can transcend language and cultures. You know, the simplicity of the visual storytelling, it makes it universally appealing, right? Even to young audiences, those who don't speak English or those who can't read the intertitles. I always am astounded when I revisit the Criterion Collection Blu-ray. And there's a great supplement on there, Chaplin Today, The Gold Rush. And I'm always flabbergasted by this one particular West African filmmaker. I'm going to butcher his name, Idrissa Odreja, I believe is maybe how you say it. But he says in his native tongue that with Chaplin, it's feelings that matter most, and feelings are universal. You don't see the color of the skin, you don't see a white man, you see the feelings. What stays with you the most are all the moments of laughter and his somewhat bizarre and unique way of walking. Also, the fact that he's just a scrap of a man. He was an adult, but also a child. And interspersed with his comments, you'll see footage of West African children watching Chaplin on a small television, maybe their first introduction to popular entertainment on television, for all I know. And everybody's laughing. It's such a transcendent feeling to see that.
Yes, that point has been made about Chaplin before. There's a famous little film called For the First Time that shows young people from various cultures being introduced to Chaplin. He is universal. He explores universal basic themes like hunger. He understood hunger. He understood the humiliations of poverty, the pains of starvation and adapting. He's looking for acceptance and basic human things in the Gold Rush. So people can understand and resonate with that. And his character is easily recognizable and distinctive. And he was a genius. I love James Agee's famous line. I could quote it from memory. It's from 1949. The finest pantomime, the deepest emotion, the richest and most poignant poetry were in Chaplin's work.
Well said, yeah, absolutely. So, Jeffrey, what's unique or distinctive about this film compared to his other works, especially the ones that came later? Because again, before the Gold Rush, he wasn't doing many feature films. In what ways was it the first of its kind, and did it in any way set the template for his future films?
Well, if you look at the original cut of the film, he described it as a dramatic comedy. So a major character dies in the Gold Rush. The supporting actors in the Gold Rush aren't stylized or stereotypes like in many earlier comedies.
Mm-hmm.
Just a lovely mixture of the comic and the dramatic. That inspired him to feel at the end of the shoot when the film was cut together, yes, this is the film I want to be remembered by. That it was a summation and the culmination of everything that he had done up until that time. And it's just beautifully realized.
But can you think of anything he does uniquely or exclusively in the Gold Rush that he doesn't repeat later? I'm just curious, like even production techniques or approaches.
Now, he was pretty consistent in his production techniques.
Mm-hmm.
I think what is interesting about the Gold Rush is he obviously the pathos humor is well in evidence in this film. And his transformation gags, if you will, The idea of, let's say, the boiling and eating of the boot. That's my favorite scene in the film. The idea of transforming a commonplace physical object into unique creations was Chaplin's probably great comic gift. The boot is produced, and Chaplin handles it with the courtesy and care as if he was handling some superb piece of Dover sole. The nails are treated as if they were tiny bones, the shoelaces like spaghetti. I mean, the humor and brilliance of the scenes just continues to play out with the elegant music and counterpoint to this ridiculous action, of desolation and despair, what have you. That's the essence of Chaplin. And we'll take that transposition idea to the other great set piece, the dance of the rolls, where the forks and the rolls, they look like little feet. He does a little clog dance.
Right. Now, that had actually been done by Fatty Arbuckle before, not to the same extent, perhaps. But my question was going to be the eating of the shoe. Had that been done before in silent comedy that he was riffing on, or did he kind of invent this?
I guess we'll never know. I mean,
80% of silent films are gone, so I guess we'll never know the true answer.
the pioneer comedy producer was telling me once, I met him just once.
Mhm.
He wanted to sort of diminish Chaplin by saying he thought he saw something of the eating of the boot on a stage routine once. I don't know. You mentioned Arbuckle doing the dance of the rolls prior to Chaplin. Does anyone remember Arbuckle doing it?
No.
Everyone remembers Chaplin doing it.
That's correct.
Robert Flory, who knew Arbuckle and Chaplin in the 20s, insisted that long before Chaplin immortalized the routine on film, he was doing it as a amusement, as a turn at restaurants at Mousson Frank. And he would drape a napkin over his head, and he'd pull the napkin over his head to conclude the act. I mean, Chaplin, a clog dancer as a child, so it seems logical that he would know how to do that and play with it.
Mm-hmm.
Arbuckle's interpretation looks like imitating Chaplin's feet. I don't know. I don't know who created these things. I just know we all remember Chaplin doing it.
And we have to remember that Chaplin came as a youngster from meager means. So, I mean, he probably went through periods where he was very hungry. So he kind of knew this life to some extent.
And he was working as a clog dancer at age 10 to support himself because he had no parents to nurture him.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to shift here and talk a bit about what makes Chaplin's approach to humor, in this movie in particular, and his comic sensibilities so timeless. So if I could kick things off, I mean, we can agree. The Little Tramp, he's kind of an everyman, right? He's a surrogate for the audience on a journey, on a quest, adventure, or experience. Typically, that's a through line through all of his movies, his major feature films. He's a likable underdog by virtue of being small, diminutive, often surrounded by bigger and stronger, but not always smarter men and characters. And here I'll quote, this is a DVD savant writer Glenn Erickson, who said, Chaplin's tramp is the essence of the outsider looking in, the little man excluded from the party. And we certainly see that here, especially in the dance hall sequences.
Oh, yes.
But because the humor is often self-deprecating, Jeffrey, it makes the tramp the butt of jokes, a subject of humiliation. Because of this, he evokes well-earned sympathy, in my opinion, well-earned empathy amidst the comedy. Now, some will argue that Charlie's sensibilities are over-sentimentalized, that there's too much pathos, too much maudlin mushiness, if you will, in his movies, especially compared to, let's say contemporaries like Buster Keaton, right, the great stone face. Others feel Chaplin hits the perfect emotional chords to leave us feeling satisfied by the end of the picture. Where do you land on this, and how do you defend Chaplin among the critics who say, he's too sentimental?
I don't think much of that. I mean, everyone has their own opinion. Opinions aren't facts.
Mm-hmm.
One person could say Chaplin isn't funny. I mean, it's a personalized thing, and I'm not going to denigrate anyone that doesn't agree with me. I just think time has shown that Chaplin has survived and will continue to do so. Part of his great gift is that he did everything himself. One writer, director, producer, so it's uniquely him. And I think this shines through in all his movies. Yes, Buster Keaton did some beautiful films, but he did also, some films that aren't so interesting. That's no bad statement against Keaton. Keaton had to do more films. Chaplin worked very slowly. But the output is there. The quality of the work is excellent.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think it needs to be defended. If you think it's sentimental, it's your privilege. But it's Chaplin. And as product becomes, and we call it product now, content, gets more homogenized and uninteresting because it's outputted. I like the idea of an individual mind, a unique creation from a singular artist, that even his flaws to me are should be embraced and are more fascinating because, again, it's the work of one individual. Flaws and all, but I find that all rather fascinating.
Yeah, to me, the sentimentality works. I'm just kind of a softie at heart. So what can I say? That's just the way I'm programmed. And I think profoundly emotional undercurrents run through Chaplin's work, where sentiment and humor are, if you will, intertwined to create stories infused with sorrow and joy and pain and ecstasy and universal feeling in the human condition. We've already talked about this, but one of his greatest strengths was his ability to portray the human condition in a way that transcended language, right? Allowing audiences of all backgrounds, including those who couldn't read or didn't know English, to connect deeply with his stories. And that resonates 100 years later to me in my book. But the key, Jeffrey, to appreciating The Little Tramp, I think, is to realize that the inherent charm and humor, it comes from presenting this cartoonish character, right, who always tries to maintain dignity, pride, normalcy, virtue, despite repeatedly being embarrassed, repeatedly being belittled, overlooked, mistreated, not taken seriously, and, notwithstanding his impoverished look and condition. So it's the little guy trying to maintain the dignity, but self-deprecating humor, right? Is that at the heart of The Little Tramp for you?
Yes, his character is called the lone prospector in the film, and loneliness is a major theme in the film.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond the comedy set pieces, there's a deeper, more persisting appeal. I guess the test of great art is whether it can work its magic on subsequent generations. And as we've just said, discussed, the films are universal, they're timeless, it's artful, and of course it's funny. I mean, it's all there.
Yep. And funny doesn't get old, in my opinion. I mean, there's such a thing as dated humor, but I really don't think this movie is showing any creaks.
Usually humor dates the speech, visual humor, and it's so hard to create great visual comedy. Films like The Gold Rush and Keaton's films are evergreen. I mean, people just keep going back to them as inspiration.
But especially this film, because I think it's a little bit above critical reproach in the, oh, well, it's so old, it can't be funny anymore, that department. It's above that kind of criticism because it's a period piece, right? Even when they were making the film, nobody lived through, well, maybe some people had lived through the Gold Rush. I guess it wasn't that far removed. But you know what I'm saying? It's like you're allowed a little bit more flexibility and latitude because you're recreating something from the far past. And somehow that humor translates to me more authentically because, we have nothing to compare it to. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense to me. But you're talking to the converted.
Of course. Yeah, right. Exactly. All right. I want to talk a bit about how this film would have been influential or innovative. Can you think of examples of how it may have inspired subsequent movies or filmmakers, Jeffrey?
The great filmmaker Jean Renoir thought The Gold Rush perfect, just a masterpiece. He said something interesting, though. The only thing that has lost with time with The Gold Rush is its freshness. And I think that's an interesting comment to make because so many people have been inspired by and have lifted liberally from The Gold Rush, mainly animation. Walt Disney, Chuck Jones. Chuck Jones, the creator of Bugs Bunny, told me personally how much he had taken from The Gold Rush.
This movie in particular, right?
This
Okay.
movie in particular for various Bugs Bunny cartoons. I mean,
Wow.
I was just at a screening of George Stevens' famous film, A Place in the Sun.
Oh, yeah. We covered it here on the podcast a few years ago.
And that scene where they walk by Montgomery Clift's character, he thinks that they're looking at him and they walk by. It's a scene out of The Gold Rush. And I was talking to George Stevens Jr. about it. And he goes, oh, yes, big Chaplin fan, my father. You see this all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And you see, of course, Johnny Depp doing the dance of the rolls in Benny and June or Robert Downey Jr. doing it quite rightly for the biopic Chaplin. But nothing really improves upon or tops Chaplin. So despite the many borrowings, the comedy still is just as strong, but Jean Renoir is quite right. One thing that has been lost with time with The Gold Rush is its freshness. It must have been quite a remarkable thing to behold The Gold Rush in its original release.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. We weren't there at the time. It's lost some of that luster just in terms of seeing it for the first time in its original context. But I think you've laid out a clear case that so many different artists and filmmakers have been inspired. So let's go a little deeper into that. And I'll share what I've looked up, and I'm sure you can confirm some of these facts. But it's been called the first feature-length comedy epic.
Yes.
So this precedes Keaton's The General by a full year, and it being worthy of that word epic thanks to its impressive scope, right? It blends vast, visually stunning landscapes, period authenticity, high production values that emphasize Chaplin's visionary approach to storytelling on an ambitious level.
Yes.
I quoted you here. You wrote, "The Gold Rush has an epic quality. The film presents adventures on a grand, heroic scale that are organically united through the central character of the tramp. The Gold Rush is his greatest and most ambitious silent film," you said. "It was also the longest and most expensive comedy film produced up to that time." So right from the top, I mean, he's aiming for the stars. Like, he's throwing every bit of resource he can at this, and it's going to get a lot of attention. And fortunately, it earns that attention and accolades because it's such a well-crafted film. You also point out in your essay about this movie that the film was revolutionary in its use of film comedy to depict a dramatic historic event.
Yes.
And, the director opting to shoot, for example, on location on a scale he had never previously attempted. So, again, further ammunition for how this was innovative. But, yeah, let's go back to what you were talking about a moment ago, because The Gold Rush contains... It's got to be one of the earliest and most charming examples of what I guess you'd call the mistaken flirtation gag, where the tramp misinterprets a wave from in this case Georgia at a dance hall, thinking it's meant for him, only to realize she's gesturing to someone else. How many times have we seen this in movies? Well, let me give you a few examples in the many decades after the Gold Rush. So you think of, there's a similar sequence in Annie Hall, Naked Gun from the Files of the Police Squad, Dumb and Dumber.
Yes.
There's Something About Mary, Love Actually, Mr. Bean's Holiday, Crazy Stupid Love, and even La La Land. Each of these films features a variation of that moment where a male character misreads attention or affection from afar, only to discover it's really intended for somebody else. Now, here's another possible first, and maybe you can dispel and tell me, actually, Eric, that was done earlier, but I don't know, so you tell me. But the film may also be responsible for the trope of a male character acting with wild, carefree enthusiasm, blissfully unaware that his romantic interest is watching him look utterly ridiculous. We, of course, think of the scene in the second cabin where he's, ripping open the pillows and dancing about. And, of course, Georgia is watching him from the doorway. And then when he realizes he's being watched, he's going to maintain his dignity again, even though he's covered with feathers and looking absolutely ridiculous. Subsequent movies that borrowed this trope include Singin' in the Rain. You recall, like, when Gene Kelly is dancing about and the police officer finds him in the rain. The Nutty Professor, where Jerry Lewis's awkward charm backfires in front of his crush. Back to the Future. You have Marty McFly losing himself in a rock performance as his mother looks on in confusion. The Mask, Napoleon Dynamite, 500 Days of Summer. There are many other examples of this. Do you think this is the first example of that trope, or do you recall an earlier instance?
I don't recall an earlier instance off the top of my head. As a filmist, I'm always reluctant to use the word first.
Sure.
But clearly, I think they are all drawing on Chaplin.
Yep.
He's the well from which everyone drinks. And that film was readily available. We've established it was reissued theatrically in 1942. A lot of audiences saw it. And then it went public domain here in this country. People could get any copy they wanted, even if it was in a muddy print, for a very long time. It's just been around. And people have embraced it, and people know it's important. It's Chaplin.
Now, here's another example of, again, I'll be careful. I'm not going to say the first, but an early example of kind of a meta wink at the audience, meta, if you will. So in the final scene of the 1925 original version, what do we see? Well, the tramp and Georgia are kissing while their picture is being taken. The photographer says, "Oh, you've spoilt the picture." To which the tramp responds with this dismissive hand gesture, as if to say, "I don't care that the picture is spoiled. Deal with it." Mm-hmm. This has to be, Jeffrey, one of the first meta in-jokes for a feature-length comedy wherein Chaplin is acknowledging that his penchant for sentimentality and romantic closure, it could be frowned upon by some viewers. It could be dismissed by critics as soppy or self-indulgent. Nevertheless, the filmmaker believes this is the proper conclusion that ties up any loose romantic threads, and which reveals exactly how these two characters, and by the way, the two real actors who fall in love on set, feel about each other. It's so interesting that he chooses to excise that final shot, that final scene from the 1942 version.
Well, if you're making an epic, a hero has to go on a journey, and traditionally you get the girl at the end. So for his grand epic, you needed that sort of conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
When he wanted to reshape the film. He no longer needed to create this autobiographical statement. It no longer served his purposes. He always wanted the film shorter. So when he reshaped it for the 1942, he didn't need that ending anymore.
I disagree with it, though. I love that ending. I think it so perfectly kind of ties up the 1925 version, and I found it was a disappointment comparing and contrasting that it was out of the 42 version.
I agree with you, but I've found the more I question Chaplin, the more I find that Chaplin was right. It was for a different audience.
Mm-hmm.
And that audience didn't seem to miss that ending. But I agree with you. I prefer the original ending.
Reading the in-joke, the meta joke there, to me, that's how I interpret it.
And audiences, the Hollywood crowd, understood that in-joke beautifully. But also remember, if you're creating a grand epic, a hero has to go on a journey, and you have to have a clear, unambiguous ending. And the boy gets the girl.
But think about how well that 1925 ending persists today. It would be so much more appreciated by those who only have seen the 42 version. Again, the meta-ness of that ending, it aged very well. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Chaplin loved to break the fourth wall and do little meta things as you see all the time. He was very unique.
So just to finish this thought about innovative or influential, of course, you learned that Chaplin financed the Gold Rush himself through United Artists. This is the film company he co-founded in 1919 with Douglas Fairbanks, with Mary Pickford, and with D.W. Griffith. Four of the giants in the film world at the time, and doing so allowed him creative control completely and financial control. I'm reading here, maybe you can verify, the 1925 silent version cost an estimated $923,000 to make. Does that sound right?
Yes.
But that's a massive sum for the time.
Massive.
And that high cost was largely due to the filmmaker's perfectionism, right? The movie's extended production timeline, its elaborate sets, its special effects, the large-scale recreations of the Klondike wilderness. So what's he doing here? Well, he's setting a powerful example for future independent filmmakers. It's nice that, he's one of the richest persons in the world and he can afford to do this, but he's also setting an example that you can accomplish your vision even without the backing of a major studio. And so his determination in this and future feature film projects, maybe it paved the way for others to take creative risks in the name of meaningful, innovative cinema. You mentioned some of the things that riffed on the Dance of the Rolls and other things in the Gold Rush. I'll just kind of give a quick summary list and repeat maybe perhaps some of the ones you mentioned. But there's a Three Stooges short called Pardon My Scotch that plays on that Dance of the Rolls. North to Alaska, this Alaskan frontier adventure that mirrors Chaplin's use of humor in tough environments. There are a couple of films from India, Michael Madana Kamarajan from 1990, and a film called Welcome. They reused the cabin hanging from the edge of the cliff gag. You mentioned Benny and June. I thought of Fargo because that's a film that shares a snowy, isolated setting, dark humor, and a wanted fugitive killer. The Artist is an easy one to go to, the 2011 Academy Award winner. But also, most recently, have you seen Hundreds of Beavers?
Yes.
So, that's an obvious riff on the Gold Rush, is it not?
I agree.
So there you go. The legacy is intact and still chugging on. All right, so what themes are explored in this picture, Jeffrey? Is this a movie that, are we thinking too hard about if we're going into thematic content, or is there some there?
No, you had a carefully crafted film with themes. You had a single idea of hunger. But it's not just physical hunger. It's a hunger for acceptance, hunger for various things. It's a very thoughtful film. But again, he was inspired by the dramatic incidents of the Donner Party. That's rather dark material to mine comedy from. But it was based on fact. So it has an epic quality, yes. The humor is tinged with pathos humor, it's sadness, and there's dark elements, there's death in the movie. He's exploring and mining a lot of things. It isn't just on one level. It isn't just on one key.
No, it's so true. I like what you say, you're quoted in that essay again, that Chaplin's theme for the film is the quest for basic human needs.
Yes.
Food, money, shelter, acceptance, and love, set in the harsh environment of the Gold Rush. It's no coincidence, you continue, that the film's setting mirrors the materialistic 1920s. And of course, we know what happens at the end of the 1920s. But yeah, I think you're touching on this thin line between comedy and tragedy, because much of this humor, it's decidedly black. It focuses on the stark reality of starvation It features desperate individuals willing to kill, to cheat, steal, commit cannibalism. As funny as The Gold Rush is, it's easy to forget that two smaller characters are shot dead. Their murderer also dies. A faceless prospector, we see him apparently terminally collapse into the snow. Several characters nearly starve to death. So yeah, the context is pretty bleak and stark.
It's a jazz age document commenting on the time, much like The Great Gatsby, which is also 100 years old this year. But it really does speak to our time. And that's what makes a great piece of art.
Can you expand upon that a little bit? How does it comment on 2025?
Well, I think we're money mad. People will do cruel things. You have to do a lot to maintain your humanity and your individuality. There's a lot. Gatsby is a flawed character, but he has a dreamy vision, much like the lone prospector. And he's at odds with a lot of other characters who have a different mission in life. I think a good jazz age document also can speak to our time. I think that shows you a great piece of art. Let's just take it out of the realm of the movies, a good piece of literature, and there you see how great art works.
That's well articulated, and I can buy that theory, absolutely. Just to finish this thought and kind of round third base, head for home here, I think the film is also about the interplay of greed, of luck, and of resourcefulness. All of these qualities, if you think about it, come back to reward or punish the prospector characters we follow, not just the little tramp, but other characters. Some also see this film as an allegory for the untapped potential of Hollywood at that time, where gold of another kind was waiting to be mined by intrepid prospectors in Hollywood, many of whom would suffer in defeat while others struck it rich in the young boomtown. So it could be a little bit of an allegory.
Chaplin, when he made The Gold Rush, Hollywood was a boomtown.
Yep.
And it's a ghost town today, but it was a boom town when Chaplin made the film. I don't think he was interested in making a statement about Hollywood. I think it kind of tied into this autobiographical statement he was making about himself in the 1925 version.
Right.
But I do think he was trying to make a big, ambitious, quality film that would get a lot of attention because United Artists really needed that from him at that time. He helped build this distribution company in 1919. He made a film called A Woman of Paris, which was a dramatic film that didn't really make the buck like his associates Fairbanks and Pickford had hoped. And he dragged his feet, and it took 2 additional years for him to make this comedy film, The Gold Rush. So it really had to just knock it out of the park because they needed the money. This company going. It wasn't a studio, it was a distribution company, but they needed all the partners to actively participate and get it going. So it achieved that purpose.
There's one more takeaway that I think about every time I watch the Gold Rush. And of course, it's a great movie to watch in the wintertime because, of course, it's a snowy, barren atmosphere and so forth. But, of course, it could be watched any time of year. But the takeaway is that inner warmth can keep you alive in a cold world, right? The tramp, he survives in large part because he demonstrates courage in the face of Mother Nature, sincerity and chivalry to Georgia and her friends, loyalty to Big Jim, and inventiveness by making meals out of whatever he can find. Yeah, I think it's a movie about pluck and resourcefulness.
I like that. I agree with you.
So it's the 100th birthday of the Gold Rush, Jeffrey. Birthdays, I maintain, are about giving presents, but it's the fans who continue to receive the gifts. I'll say that to my grave. So what is this movie's greatest gift to viewers, Jeffrey?
I would say simply the gift of laughter. This is something I tell students all the time when I have the opportunity to teach Chaplin. I say, as with any encounter with great art, I would hope the Gold Rush would further your own understanding of the meaning of beauty, the function of humor, and the wisdom of compassion. So it's a great piece of art, but its true gift is the gift of laughter. And we need it more than ever, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. Hear, hear. Great words, and I raise a toast and salute to the movie with you.
Oh, thank you. Let's do that.
All right, ask me this question, and I will say this. The Gold Rush's greatest present to birthday wishers, it's the sheer quantity of yucks on display. So kind of what you said, the laughter. So many of these bits continue to generate big laughs 100 years onward, right? Cases in point are the tramp's blissful ignorance that he's being followed by a real bear, a creature he later wrestles with. Fighting gale force winds inside the cabin with slippery feet. The rifle continually pointing at the hapless tramp who ultimately thinks he's been shot. Chaplin making a delicacy out of a consumed candle, followed soon by, of course, the ingestion of the boiled shoe. Big Jim having big chicken hallucinations. The famished tramp frantically sharpening the cutlery, which I've got to tell you, this made me laugh the hardest during this recent rewatch, Jeffrey. The tramp being convinced that Georgia is flirting with him when it's actually the man behind him. The prospector's pants repeatedly falling down, followed by the tying of the dog leash around his waist and the dancing hijinks that follow. The little man believing he's punched out his romantic nemesis when the culprit is actually a fallen clock. The tramp playing dead to get a gratis breakfast, instantly transforming from a frozen hobo to a picky guest with a voracious appetite. You recall Chaplin lighting his foot and the chair of George's friend ablaze. The exuberant tramp chaotically ransacking the cabin as Georgia secretly watches him, then trying to act dignified while covered in feathers. We covered this earlier. There's the snow shoveling gag and its 3 punchlines. There's the world-famous Dance of the Rolls routine. And, of course, the scene of the ramshackle cabin dangling off the precipice, which, to me, stands as the film's finest set piece and most unforgettable piece of slapstick. Love that sequence. There are also dozens of other laughs interspersed between these sequences, which speaks to the Gold Rush's immense wealth of jokes. Some of the prospector characters in this film, yeah, they strike it rich, but the real mother lode, it's the comedy gold Chaplin unearths in this film. All right, so the second greatest gift in a picture that thrives on carefully choreographed physicality is Chaplin's not-so-subtle facial nuances, Jeffrey. They're all calibrated to deliver maximum emotional and humorous impact, are they not? Buster Keaton, he had as impressive an array of comedic skills at his disposal, but the stone face couldn't match Charlie in facial expressivity. In my estimation, Chaplin's most underrated talent and the unquantifiable element that significantly enhances the hilarity in his works. From, exaggeratedly arched eyebrows to twee nose scrunching that triggers a crinkled grease paint mustache, to a smile that alternates from a romantically ebullient grin to a Cheshire cat grimace, the little tramp had an endlessly malleable countenance that made all the other grand comedy gestures and elaborate funny bits work. Indeed, for me, most of the heavy lifting in the Gold Rush occurs in the real estate beneath the bowler hat and above that wrinkled tie. So are there any current or forthcoming projects, maybe some events or appearances or otherwise, that our listeners should know about? What's going on with Jeffrey Vance these days?
Well, I just had the Criterion Collection just released A Woman in Paris on Blu-ray and DVD, and I contributed a 20-minute video essay explaining all of Chaplin's various innovations.
Sweet.
I'm very pleased at how that turned out. And then later this year, I have an illustrated book on the 1950 classic Sunset Boulevard. That film is celebrating its 75th anniversary this year.
That's right. We'll be featuring that later this year on our show. So is this a children's book or what is it?
It's an illustrated book to celebrate the 75th anniversary. Lots of great unpublished images. We're reprinting the script. Paramount is involved with this book, and so I have access to their various archival holdings, and I haven't seen the galleys yet. It's mainly an illustrated book. There is a text to it that I contributed, but nothing of great length. That will be out in the end of the third quarter of this year.
Oh, looking forward to that.
Paramount is re-releasing the film later this year, and it's dovetail with the re-release of the film for the 75th anniversary.
Yeah, it's a real milestone year for many movie classics, and we'll be looking forward to that. Wow, that sounds really exciting. I will definitely keep that on my radar, that book, and I'll have to eventually pick myself up that Criterion Collection edition that you are featured on. Very exciting.
Without A Woman in Paris, there wouldn't have been the Gold Rush. So it's a very important film in Chaplin's career.
Yeah, it'd be a great back-to-back watch for movie fans out there, no question. Well, Jeffrey, I could clear the decks and talk with you for the rest of the day about all things Chaplin if we had the time. But alas, we both have lives to live, we have places to go, we have things to do, and especially movies to watch, right? So my heartfelt appreciation for taking a big bite of this Klondike bar with me and exploring the intricacies of the Gold Rush, which now marks a glorious centennial. Hear, hear. So thanks again, and here's hoping we can reunite maybe next year to celebrate the 90th birthday of Modern Times, if you're willing.
Oh, that'd be lovely. I'd like that very much. And I thank you, Eric, for thinking of me. Really been a pleasure, as always.
Ditto. Vice versa. Thank you so much, sir.
Bye-bye.
So nice to catch up with Jeffrey after our last chat. Oh, that was 4 years ago. Definitely the man in the know when it comes to all matters Chaplin. Mr. Vance, a tip of the bowler hat to you. Time now for standing ovations. This is where I give a shout out to a film, book, TV program, website, podcast, or other work that I think would be of great interest to classic film lovers just like you and me. So for April, I'm going to nominate YouTube. Yep, YouTube, which always offers a selection of free movies for streaming. But I got to tell you, currently they boast an outstanding menu of gratis flicks that come highly acclaimed as all-time classics. Cases in point, hey, right now you can watch any of the following feature film masterworks for no charge. All right, not listed in any particular order. Heat, The Untouchables, The Thing, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, The Last Waltz, La La Land, Braveheart, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, The Ten Commandments, High Plains Drifter, 12 Angry Men, The King of Comedy, Poltergeist, Gremlins, Starman, The Sting, Once Upon a Time in America, Arrival, Glengarry Glen Ross, Lawrence of Arabia, Contact, The Night of the Hunter, To Catch a Thief, There Will Be Blood, The Quiet Man, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Mississippi Burning, and Double Indemnity. And that's just scratching the surface. There are hundreds of movies you can watch right now for no charge at YouTube. And, you know, they're not paying me to say this, but you don't have to sit through any commercials on YouTube if you have a YouTube premium subscription like I do. I find that the monthly charge is well worth it because there's always interesting videos, movies, and content waiting to be found on this streaming site. Just my opinion, but anyway, if you want a shortcut link to see all the free films currently available for no charge on YouTube, simply visit tinyurl.com/YouTubeClassics425. Did you know that Cineversary has its own website? That's right, we actually now have a vanity URL that's easy to remember, which will take you to a freshly designed portal where you can quickly access the latest episode of your favorite podcast, as well as all of our previous installments. Now it's a lot easier to spread the good word about our show to your friends and family. You simply tell them to visit Cineversary.com. Pretty simple, right? That's Cineversary.com. We also have a custom email address just for you. Now, if you ever want to share feedback on our show or offer suggestions for future installments, or maybe you just have a question about Cineversary, send it to us at cineversarypodcast@gmail.com. Also, you can really help our show grow by spreading the good word about the Cineversary show to your peeps. Even better, please leave a positive online review and rating, which significantly helps us to get discovered by new listeners. So if you use Apple Podcasts, Spotify, CastBox, some of these other services, simply search for the Cineversary page, look for a link that says something like ratings or reviews, click that link, and leave a review and or rating. While you're at it, take a moment to like us on Facebook. We also have a presence on Twitter. Our handle is @CineversaryPod, where you can easily tweet or follow us. And if you want to go an extra step in your support of our show and help keep us ad-free, please consider making a monetary donation to the Cineversary podcast by visiting tinyurl.com/donate-cineversary. We really appreciate your support. Lastly, have you checked out my Cineverse Group website? Yeah, it's easy to get confused by these similar sounding names, Cineversary, Cineverse, Tomato. But Cineverse is actually the name of my private film discussion group I founded back in 2005 that continues to meet weekly on Zoom. Every week, the Cineverse group watches, researches, and discusses a different movie, and I create a summary write-up, call it a mini essay if you will, on that movie that gets posted to the Cineverse group blog. So if you want to enjoy reading in-depth content that examines different discussion-worthy motion pictures, including classic Hollywood films, independent features, foreign masterworks, modern movies, and silent-era standouts, then visit cineversegroup.com, simply spelled CINEVERSE group.com. Fun fact, every posted article on cineversegroup.com includes a link to a recording of our group discussion of that particular film, with me leading the conversation as moderator. So if you like what I'm doing on the Cineversary podcast, you might also want to give a listen to some of our Cineverse Group recordings, which are podcasts of a different sort. Again, head over to cineversegroup.com, where you can check out some interesting text and audio content on a variety of films, not necessarily celebrating a milestone anniversary. We're now in the thick of spring, but amidst the flowers and sunshine, there's always room for fearsome shadows and expressionistic noir with horror undertones. That's an apt way to describe Charles Laughton's one and only directorial effort, the 1955 classic Night of the Hunter, which will be the focus of our May episode, a film that celebrates a 70th anniversary this year. Until then, this is your humble host, Eric Martin, reminding you to butter up that popcorn, live a big screen surround sound life, and cherish those classic movies, because they're not getting older. Of course, they're getting better. Thanks, as always, for giving us a listen.